Hey, friend, it is so good to see you. I've really missed you. I hope your summer has been amazing. I hope it's been full of fun and sun and hopefully a little bit of break for you amidst all of the craziness. But as we get into fall and the kids go back to school, I'm excited to rejoin and get together like we do every single Wednesday. So big hi to Barbara and Kelly and Jen and Connor and Andrew and Jim and Giacomo and everybody who's coming in and saying hi. If you haven't already, say hi with the rest of the group. We are a very friendly bunch here, I promise. And if it is your first time joining us, just know that this is going to go a little differently than some of the other lives that you might have joined, where you just kind of sit back and relax and, absorb information. You can do that too. Nothing against that. But we tend to be a little more interactive around these parts. So, really, the chat is going to be your best friend. It's where all the tips and tricks and tactics, not only from me, but from all the other smart people in this room, end up. So, be sure to get active in that session. I'm really excited today to dig into one of the topics that I think comes up so much as we kind of get into the latter part of the year. It's when things maybe start to slow down, we start to get into the holidays, and people start really evaluating and saying, am I happy? Is this really what I want to be doing? And career pivots and the topic of career pivots come up again and again. So I knew that I wanted to spend some time during today's mini workshop to really get into what does that look like? How do we navigate that? What's going on there? So, if you yourself, if Tony or Gil or Elaine, if any of you guys have navigated a career pivot, let us know. Don't let me do all the talking. Make sure in the chat to say, hey, that's affected me too. But without further ado, let's get into this mini workshop content. So, first and foremost, I love going over what to expect, what we're going to be looking at. So, here is a little brief agenda of what we are going to be going over today. So, we already said hi to each other. That part is done. And, I like to think we did a pretty good job of that. So, check, check, check. But we are going to really get into when is the right time to pivot? What does that look like? Steps when you're going to prepare to pivot. Again, how we're thinking about that. And then we're really going to sink into obstacles, big mistakes to avoid, and things that you should be paying attention to. As always, we are going to be covering questions as we go along. It's an interactive session. We're not waiting until the end. So if you have questions, then again, ask them in the chat, ask me, ask Jim, who has navigated at least 4 career pivots in the past 20 years. So again, we got multiple experts in the room when it comes to really thinking about these career pivots. So don't just think that you're going to get all the knowledge from me. There's going to be other people you're getting knowledge from too. So I came across this study and I thought it was really an interesting tidbit and fact to look at. And that is, when I was thinking about how many jobs a person has in their lifetime, because it came up a lot recently. I'll share this story. My mom actually just put in her official. She retired officially, but then kind of went into consulting and now is actually retiring for real. But she was in the school system in Florida, where I grew up in Palm Beach County for, wait for it, 49 years. Hand to God, 49 years, my mom worked in the school system. Different jobs within the school system, a teacher, a principal, kind of had different roles, but the school system for 49 years. And we were talking and I was saying, oh my gosh, Mom, one, what an amazing accomplishment, 49 years, round of applause, fantastic. But also just 49 years. I mean, can you imagine 40? And I was just telling her, nowadays, unheard of. Like none of my friends are working in the same place for 9 years, forget 49 years, 9 years is sort of like a whoa, crazy. And so started to look into, well, what does it look like? How many jobs does a person have? Or how many career pivots are people making? Because again, 49 years. Thank you, Kelly. I'm really proud of her too. But 49 years, that's just, it's not something that happens anymore. So went digging up for the answer, and the answer is actually 12. The average person in the workforce switches jobs 12 times, and most switch career paths 5 to 7 times. So not only is it 12 different jobs, it can sometimes be 5 to 7 different career paths. So again, love my mom, but gone are the days of 49 years at one organization. It just doesn't really happen anymore. People are really jumping around and going from thing to thing, whether or not those are related. So as Connor says, major shift from psychotherapy to project management, totally different industries, totally different fields. So really thinking about, if we already know that statistically speaking, a small percentage of people will be like my mom, certainly 49 years, absolutely. But, the majority of us aren't going to be like that. So, how can we really think about these career pivots? How can we really think about switching jobs? So, like Connor, we can kind of flawlessly go from one industry to the next, which is huge. Or as Kelly was saying, the average person stays at one job for 4 years. Again, these are all averages. I feel like I'm going to get so many messages after this, like, that's not true, Kim. My sister stayed at her job for 10 years. These are all averages. Save your messages for me about your sister for another coffee with Kim, because I get it. These are just averages that we're talking about. I know that there's going to be outliers to every situation. But what the main thing that I always come back to when I'm talking about career pivots for myself, for other people, I know there's several people in the chat right now who have actively navigated these career pivots, is to really identify, am I at a point of career pivoting, or am I at the point of just slowing down? So a lot of times what happens is things get busy, right? You get crazy. The to-do list gets out of control. Your boss is annoying. Your coworkers are annoying. And you sort of come home and you fling up your hands and you go, that's it. Like, I'm leaving this work behind. And whenever I'm faced with a colleague or a friend or a family member that's kind of going through this, I always say, like, take a step back, right? Take a step back. And what are you really experiencing, actually not inspired by this job? Or are you experiencing, I'm frustrated by this job? Because I think a lot of times those become very intertwined, and it helps to kind of take a step back and look at that. So these are the questions that I always ask to other people when they come to me with this sort of, that's it, forget psychotherapy, I'm going into project management. These clients are driving me crazy. These doctors, these insurance companies are driving me crazy. These are the questions that I always ask every single person that I sit down with that comes to me and says, Kim, I'm thinking about switching my career. The questions are, is this burnout? So are you just feeling like you just don't even want to go into work? Like, you're just feeling really distant from work. You're not engaging it in a way that you used to. You're feeling exhausted. Like, the thought of going into your boss or the thought of dealing with your clients is just, I just exhausted, just absolutely exhausted. Really kind of getting into that negative self-talk. I'm not good at this. I don't really want, this isn't really exactly what I want to be doing anymore. Where is your self-talk really headed? Is it negative? And again, do you just kind of feel like, again, throwing your hands up, throwing in the towel, just kind of like, oh, I'm giving up? Because a lot of the times those are signs of burnout. Those are not signs of a career pivot. They might lead to a career pivot, but those initial signs are burnout. That is your nervous system, that is your mental, physical, emotional well-being just overwhelmed. Your cup overfloweth in a bad way. Your cup is making a hot mess on the table. So you're burnt out, you're overwhelmed. Those are very different than the signs of a pivot. A pivot is really when again, you're sitting down with me, you're sitting down with Jen, you're sitting down with Kelly, one of your friends, and you're saying, you know what? I just don't feel like I'm learning anymore. I don't feel like I'm learning anything else at this job, or, there's no real opportunities for me to level up. I'm at a place where I'm making this up, assistant manager. My manager's been in the job for 30 years. That's kind of the highest you can go. And they don't plan on retiring for another 10 years. So, my upward trajectory is kind of capped. I can't go up anymore. And I don't really feel like I'm learning anymore. Again, that's a sign of like, okay, maybe we should stop and think about this. This might be pivot worthy. Or you have this feeling of, I call it here, I climbed the mountain. I climbed the mountain because I was talking to a friend the other day. She works in project management at an ad agency in New York City. And she was just telling me, you know what, Kim, I've accomplished everything I wanted to do. I worked on a Super Bowl ad. I've worked in this industry for 10 years. I've had amazing clients. I've had Fortune 500 companies. Like, I climbed the mountain. I reached Everest. There's nothing, I did all the things I wanted to do, and now I want to climb a new mountain. I want to find a new adventure. I want to find I've done everything in this kind of role and industry that I wanted to do. So again, you've kind of climbed that mountain. You're finding new inspiration elsewhere. Again, all of a sudden psychotherapy or project management or being that yoga teacher or getting into creative design is inspiring you. You're feeling a fire about something else. And you're starting to kind of get those little spidey senses, that inclination to start researching other things. You're just kind of, again, you're sitting there, you're a school principal, and you're thinking, maybe I go be a consultant. Maybe I go do more learning and development. Like maybe the principal stuff, I don't know. It's not really scratching the itch anymore. I'm kind of maybe going over here a little bit. And I'm curious, James, you'll have to let us know in the chat. You've pivoted 3 times, after 36 years of employment. Kind of what were those signs that you saw, that you felt, that you're like, you know what? I'm feeling that pivot. I'm feeling that pivot coming on. Because again, these signs of a pivot are really things that I've seen over and over again from friends, from colleagues, from industry people that I work with that are just, I've kind of reached that point. And I'm glad we're bringing it up because Tony's asking, how do you define a pivot? Is it a change in roles? Is it a change in companies, a change in industry? To me, a pivot is really defined as you are going to do something pretty darn different than what you're currently doing. So what do I mean by that? So if you do project management at company A, and you're working at company A, and then all of a sudden you get hired at company B, but you're also doing project management. I'm not saying all things are created equal, but project management is sort of similar no matter what company you're at, kind of different. Or you're an assistant at one company, but then you're going to go leave and be an assistant at another company. Your tasks are kind of the same. A pivot is really, wow, I was doing project management, but now I'm going to go be a yoga instructor. Or wow, I was doing marketing at this organization that I work with, but now they've asked me to jump over to the sales team. Same organization, not switching jobs, but marketing to sales, wildly different skill set. So really a pivot to me is you are really changing your skill set, changing the things that you're working on, really coming and saying, I was doing this one thing for 8 hours a day, but now my 8 hours are going to be spent doing something totally different. And again, that could be from company to company, or as Jen just pointed out, it could be something that you are working at on your own. So, Jen was doing private education leadership and then transitioned to be more of a consultant and speaker. So it doesn't even have to be, I'm going from company A to company B. It could be I'm going from company A to being an entrepreneur. or vice versa. I'm going from an entrepreneur to working at a company, just something where really your day-to-day is changing very rapidly. So I want to make sure we really understand the differences between a pivot and just feeling burnt out. Two different things. Two different things. If you're feeling burnt out, I did a 12-minute segment, all the ways that I best battle burnout, because I wish I could say I've solved the problem of burnout, but I would say probably 3 times a year I still get so burnt out despite failing my own advice. But these are really helpful tips, and I sometimes have to revisit them because, old lessons die hard. So if you need tips on burnout, hold your phone up to the screen. We'll also drop it in the chat as well via a link. But, again, if you're battling burnout, I always say that that's not really a career pivot. That's just you feeling overwhelmed and feeling like, what am I doing here? So again, really kind of identifying where we are. So once we identify where we are, you're really saying, okay, Kim, it's not burnout. It's definitely a pivot. I want to prepare to pivot. What does that look like? How are we looking at a situation where we feel it, we know we're ready for a new mountain, we're ready to climb a new mountain, we are ready, as Elaine is saying, to go from banker with lots of finance spreadsheets to baker with lots of flour, sugar, butter. We are ready for that career pivot. So here are the questions that I really want you to dig into if you're seriously considering that pivot. You really just feel like, this is it for me. Step 1, do your homework. So what does that look like? Sit down with a piece of paper and a pen, old school style. Don't do this on the computer. Don't do this on your iPad. Don't do this on your tablet. Sit down with a paper and pen and just sort of brain dump. Let all your ideas flow and write down all sorts of careers or things that interest you. So like Elaine was saying, maybe it's becoming a baker. Maybe it's becoming a yoga instructor. Maybe it's going into sales. Maybe it's going into project management. Maybe it's becoming a speaker. Maybe it's design. Maybe it's Photoshop. I don't know what it is, but just let your brain sort of work through your hand and get through all of the ideas that you have that what you think could be interesting, whether they are careers or just industries that you find just sort of fascinating. You're kind of curious about them. Next, you are going to find humans that are in those industries. You are going to go find that baker. You are going to go find that project manager. You are going to go find that creative director. You're going to go find that sales executive. You need to find an actual human who does that job that you think is interesting. That is going to be key. We have to find that human. Then we are going to ask that human for 15 minutes of their time to interview them, ask them a couple questions. Please note, 15 minutes. People do not want to give you more than 15 minutes. I can't wait for the messages that I get after this. Yes, they do. That's not enough time. That's so rude. People want to give me more than 15 minutes. No, they don't. They don't. I'll tell you they don't, because I know that I don't want to give you more than 15 minutes. I don't know you. Who are you? Think about if somebody stopped you in the store, like you're in the middle of grocery shopping, and they said, excuse me, can I talk to you for 15 minutes? I came in to get butter and eggs. 15 minutes? I got to get back to my car. I got things to do. So 15 minutes is sort of the magic number. Don't ask somebody for 30 minutes. Don't ask somebody for 45 minutes to an hour. People are busy. Do not pass go. If they want to give you more than 15 minutes, bellissimo. We love that. But we do not ask for more than 15 minutes. It's kind of like if somebody offers you something, you can take it, but you don't want to ask for it. It's kind of like, it's just too much. So again, you're going to ask them for 15 minutes. When you have 15 minutes of their time, these are the questions I want you to ask them. It's 4 questions. Take a screenshot of this, write this down. Do not lose this. These are the 4 questions that I want you to ask them when you have 15 minutes of their attention. Number 1, what are the 3 things that you do that are not on your job description? So again, a lot of times I will have friends come to me and say, oh yeah, I looked up the role of project management. I looked up what that person does. And then I say, well, did you actually talk to a human? Did you actually talk to a person? Because a lot of times what's in the job description is not what people are actually doing full time. And you've had jobs before. They say, oh, these are the 8 things you're going to be doing. You do a lot more than 8 things. There's a lot of things that are not on that job description. So talk to a human, find out what is actually on their day-to-day task list. So again, what are they repeating weekly? What are they repeating monthly? What are things that they are actually doing? Because I'm not going to lie, some of these jobs are tricky. Some of these jobs tell you, oh, it's gonna project manager, you're gonna work for us, you're gonna do these 12 things, it's all nicey nicey. Then you actually talk to somebody who does project management, and then they're like, I do way more than those 12 things. So really get a sense of what are these people actually doing? Third question you want to ask them, what is something you wish you knew about this industry and or job before you started? Perfect example of this. This is actually like really, really good. Again, I'll go back to my mom because we were just having this conversation. My mom is leaving her job of 40. She worked in this organization for 49 years. She's had this job, this like iteration of the job for 10 years. And they have 2 people that are going to kind of be her replacement. And one of the people called and asked my mom, so like I looked over the job, all the bullet points, looks really good. What's something that you think I should know? This person was so smart. And I'm so glad they did this because my mom was talking to them and my mom said, well, here's something that's not on the job description that you should know. The people that you're working with, she's like a consultant. And she said, the people that you're working with, they have full-time jobs. So usually from 8 a.m. to, 5 p.m. they're busy, which means they can't really speak to you unless it's before their job. So you're talking like 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. or it's after their job, 5 p.m. to like 7, 8 p.m. So my mom was saying, yes, you're doing all those tasks, answering emails, putting, all this stuff. But she's like, when it actually comes to the phone calls, the job description is right. You have 2 to 3 hours of phone calls a week. My mom's like, but what they don't tell you is those phone calls happen between like 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. And they happen from like 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And this woman was like, that's good to know because, I have little kids. I, want to put them to bed and make dinner, et cetera. So again, I don't want to say that, oh, we have to make sure that these companies or organizations aren't, lying to us. I'm not saying they're lying, but like, forgot that little tidbit. Like, yes, 3 hours of phone calls, but like, when are those phone calls? Because you might assume that, oh, the phone calls are happening during the day, when in reality, they're not. So again, really dig in and say, what is something you wish you knew about this job or industry before you started? Super important. And then last but not least, what is one book or newsletter or podcast that you think that I should listen to about this industry? So again, just kind of doing extra homework. What is something that they think that you should dig into? Another great thing, if you have the time, absolutely ask if there are other people that you should connect with. So again, let's say you're asking for 15 minutes of a project manager's time, you're asking them these questions. You might be able to say, oh, I know you're a project manager at XYZ company, but do you know a project manager at another company that I could talk to? So again, great example of saying, who else can I talk to that I might be able to dig in? Now, I can already tell that I'm going to get a lot of messages about questions that I left out. Here is my rub on that, because you'll find people that have 10 bullet points of all the things you should ask. You only have 15 minutes. So 15 minutes divided by like 4 or 5 questions, that's giving you 3 minutes for that person to answer. And by the way, that doesn't include the like, hi, thanks for taking the time to talk to me, and then like the goodbye. So if you want that person to answer for 2 to 3 minutes, telling you a story or whatever, you can't be asking a million questions. You don't have that much time. You only have 15 minutes. So really keep in mind, if you only have 3 to 4 questions to ask because you have that 15-minute window, what are those questions going to be? So again, I found that these 4 are the most powerful of finding that sort of insider expertise. That's really something that I found to be like, okay, worth it. So again, Step two, you've asked these questions, you've talked to people, find the shallow end. So, where can you dip your toes into this transition? So, again, using the example, I'll use like a very basic example, but okay, I am currently a banker and I want to go be a yoga instructor. I know this is a crazy example, but like I want to go be a yoga instructor. Where is the shallow end of being a yoga instructor? So, can I sign up to teach yoga on the weekends? Something that doesn't disrupt my job. Can I volunteer at a yoga studio? Where are the small ways that I could like kind of dip my toe in without cannonballing, quitting my banking job and being like, bye, losers, I'm off to be a yoga instructor and doing like a full on cannonball? Where can you kind of like get into the shallow end instead of cannonballing into, you know, that area? So, oh my gosh, we're getting such good feedback from people saying, Angela's saying like, yeah, I did a 15-minute interview with an alumni from my college and the phone call ended up going an hour and all the insight was super great. Again, perfect example, alumni from colleges, another great resource of somebody. Someone else is saying, I thought I'd get a 15 minutes from someone who reached out and now they want to have lunch. Even better. You went from 15 minutes to lunch. You'll find lots of things to say. Just take these 4 questions. You'll steal them away. So again, really just getting in touch with those people and saying, how can we go one step further? So again, how are we getting in the small area of the pool? And again, books, podcasts, LinkedIn Lives. These are great examples. Groups, newsletter. How do you find the shallow end? How do you find the shallow end to say, okay, I'm thinking about a career pivot and I'm thinking about switching from marketing to sales, banking to yoga, creative design to more marketing. Where's the shallow end? What can you start dipping your toes into to get a better feel of this industry or of that job position? Because again, cannonball lifestyle, like big splash, people do it. People do it. But here's the thing that I love bringing this up. I love bringing this up because people will always say to me, well, Kim, I follow so-and-so on Instagram and, they were working in banking and now they have 5 million followers and they're a vegan blogger. Maybe I should quit my job and be a vegan blogger. Okay, this is always what I say. Number one mistake I see people making when it comes to pivoting. And I just said it. Not being financially ready. This is the number one conversation I have with people because I think the internet and people want to feed you all this gobbledygook that's like, follow your passion, follow what inspires you. You know what inspires me? Margaritas and guac and chips. But I can't do that 5 days a week because I have to pay the bills. So this whole like, follow your inspiration, like I always say very, very specifically, who is giving you that information? Because a lot of times when you dig into it, using that vegan blogger example, by the way, I told my friend, I said, well, have you looked into that vegan blogger? And they were like, well, what do you mean? She's super famous. She has 5 million followers. And I go, yeah. Did you notice what her last name was? I'm not going to say it because I don't want to out anybody, but they said, oh yeah, it's blah, blah, blah. And I said, have you Googled that last name? And they were like, well, why? She's famous. I wouldn't need to. And I go, yeah, because if you had Googled, you would see that her grandfather was a billionaire. Yeah, was a billionaire with a B. So yeah, she could afford to quit her job and go be a vegan blogger because she'll never have to worry about money for the rest of her existence because she has a major trust fund. Now she doesn't talk about that. So a lot of people don't know about it. They just see her on social media and think, oh yeah, you're a vegan blogger and you live in this really nice house. And, but actually, she has a trust fund. So again, not being financially ready is the number one mistake I see people make when it comes to pivoting. Again, what do I mean by that? When I get into it with people about pivoting, I always say, have you really sat down and assessed what your non-negotiable expenses are? Okay, what is something that you have to pay every month that is a non-negotiable? So like rent, water, the electricity bill, non-negotiable. You have to pay those. Netflix, okay, we can cancel Netflix. Your gym membership, okay, negotiable. We could cancel the gym membership. There's a list of things that's kind of like negotiable. Like, okay, I really like my gym membership, but if I had to cancel it, I could. And then there's some that are like non-negotiable. Like we have to eat. We have to keep the lights on. We have to keep a roof over our head. So again, have you really assessed what your non-negotiable expenses are? Have you added those up in an Excel document? Do you know what those are? What will that career shift do to your salary? So again, I know we were laughing earlier about Elaine's like banker with an N to baker, cupcakes. But yeah, if you're working at a banking job and you're making six figures and you all of a sudden move to work as a manager of a cupcake shop, that is probably not six figures. You're probably going from a six-figure lifestyle to maybe a five-figure lifestyle. What does that look like? What does that mean? What is that actually going to mean for you? We have to get realistic and not like sell ourselves on like, but it's passion and I want to go into this thing and I follow my heart and my intuition and I feel inspired. Your bank account doesn't feel inspired. Your bank account doesn't feel inspired. So really think about, what is this career shift going to do to my salary? What is that actually going to look like? Then, what are your current financial commitments? What are things that you already know you are committed to paying? So again, I was talking to a friend the other day and we were going through this because she was feeling like, she might be ready to shift. And we were talking about the non-negotiable expenses, okay, rent, water, da, da, da. And then I said to her, because I kind of knew this, but she didn't write it on the piece of paper. I said, but what about those college loans? Like you promised, that you were going to put $500 a month towards those college loans. Or again, I've talked to people who say, well, I have kids and it's really important that the kids have a math tutor. I don't know, I'm making this up. I don't have kids, but or my kids have a math tutor, or my kids go to a music class, or my kids, whatever it is. So like, what financial commitments have you also made in your mind that you also need to factor in? You also need to factor that in and really think about. And then last but not least, how are you going to really get across the bridge, whether it is a drop in salary or payment between jobs? So you've said to yourself, okay, Kim, I got it. I understand that when I go from being a banker to being a baker, that I'm going to have this drop in salary. Okay, I've done the math. I've figured out what that's going to look like, how I'm going to bridge that gap from making X dollars to making Y, and how am I going to adjust things in my life to really get to that point. But also there's that gap where, again, you've done all the work, you've done, and that you're going to move from sales to marketing. You've done all the homework, you've talked to people, you're going to pivot. But when you quit this sales job and you start the marketing job, there might be a 2-month window there where you're between jobs, right? Because you're pivoting into a new industry. So again, really thinking about, what is it going to look like when I don't have a paycheck for 2 months? So again, I always say that this is one of the biggest mistakes I see people making, because I think we've romanticized this idea about pivoting, where it's like we're following our passion. And, by the way, these phones and stuff are the devil, because we see people on Instagram doing it like, oh, someone else, I saw they quit their job and became a vegan blogger. Or I saw that they went from, working at a company to now they give Excel tips on Instagram and they have millions of followers. And I always say, but we have no idea what their financial background looked like, right? Maybe they have a trust fund. They don't have to worry about paying the bills. So they can quit their job and become a vegan blogger and make no money for 6 months, right? So really thinking about, forget everybody else, forget about following your passion. I've tried to pay American Express in passion. They don't take it. That ain't the currency they take. They're not taking my whims and dreams as payment. So really think about, how am I going to financially make it? And Rachel brings up another great point. Thank you so much, Rachel. Really thinking about this pivot could end up taking longer than we think. So you might say to yourself, oh, no problem. I'm going to pivot from marketing to sales and it's going to take 6 weeks, but it might take a little longer than 6 weeks. It might be sort of hard for you to find that next job, that next opportunity. So, again, great analogy. You can think about it like a home repair. The contractor says, oh, yeah, I'll have your bathroom done in 4 months. 9 months later, you're like still waiting for the toilet to get put in. So, just know that as you pivot, might take a little bit longer than you think. And it might cost more than you think, might cost more in time, might cost more in salary, in mental capacity. So again, really, really great points when it comes to the time and money that it might take to actually pull off those transitions. So, really, what works is finding resources. This is going to be so, so pivotal when you think about how we are going to really make this pivot in a way that feels good and doesn't completely eat up our nerves, because it is very nerve-wracking. And I forgot who, I just saw it pop up in the chat, but I can't see whose name it was. But somebody was just asking about what if I have no experience? So I want to go from marketing, where I have lots and lots and lots of experience, to going into sales where I have no experience. So, oh, good. Here we go. Okay, how can I convince people that I have transferable skills? So again, when I talk about finding resources, I'm all about stealing people's homework in a nice way. We're all adults. Stealing is fine in some circumstances. Really kind of digging in. I put together 3 resources for you guys. This is not a plant, but it actually answers one. So the first one being, again, the same question: what do you do if you don't have the background, but you have the transferable skills? So here's somebody who I think you should follow, steal their homework. They have a lot of great tips. So if you have heard of Austin does an amazing job on LinkedIn of really getting people jobs without experience. So exactly what we were just talking about. So you work in sales and you want to get into marketing, but you have no experience in marketing. So he really does a great job of kind of coaching you along, whether it's resume tips or interview styles of like how to kind of transfer your skills over to a position that, again, you kind of have no experience in. You're kind of like wild, wild west. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I think I have skills that are sort of transferable. So again, really, really important. Another thing is really thinking about, okay, if we're making this pivot, what always comes up is recruiters. I'm glad that we're going to talk about that. Recruiters, resumes. Again, my resume is all about sales, but I want to get into marketing. How is it going to work if my resume is totally reflecting something different? How do I tell that story that I'm ready to move from sales to marketing in a way that is flawless and feels really natural? So again, resume writing. Jerry has amazing tips, and he actually has a resume template that you can steal. I think it's awesome. So you can find Jerry on, like, by the way, everybody I'm showing you can find on LinkedIn. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, we will have these links in the podcast show notes. So don't feel like if you're on a run, you're like, Kim, who the heck is Jerry Lee and how do I follow him? These will be in the podcast notes if you are not joining us live. But Jerry has some great free resume templates and free resume reviews, which are also really helpful. So again, please, 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 as much as you can, steal Jerry's homework when you're thinking about resumes. How do I rewrite my resume for this pivot in a way that's going to show, who I am and what I think that I can bring to the table? That's going to be huge. The last thing is, so when you are thinking about how to think about transferring those skills via resume, you're also going to probably get, hopefully, to the interview stage. So your resume is approved. You're kind of getting called back to do the interview for that sales job, for that marketing job, for that creative position. And you have to think about, okay, again, when my background is all in one thing, how do I do this interview kind of not really talking about my past, because that's not necessarily the type of work I want to do anymore, but really talking about the skills that I learned at this past job and how to bring those skills forward into a new job. So Madeline, who I have the most respect for, and she has joined us on Coffee with Kim before. Maybe we'll have to bring her back soon. Madeline has a lot of interview techniques that she has on her LinkedIn. She does LinkedIn Lives as well with tons of kind of go-to answers and go-to questions that you can ask an interviewer that will make you sound smart and accomplished and ready for that position. So Madeline is another one that is really, really great if you want to think about your interview, how you interview, what types of questions you're asking, and what type of answers that you're giving that really put you in the best light when in reality, you might not have a lot of experience when it comes to that role. So again, whether it's the resume, whether it's talking about the skills that you can bring over, or whether it is this interview and getting to the point where you feel really confident and feeling like, okay, I'm going to kick butt in this interview. I know that the skills that I'm bringing forward are going to be applicable in this new role. Those are sort of the three areas that I get questions on the most. So I wanted to give you experts in those three areas that you should absolutely be following, using their free resources, using the kind of knowledge that they're putting out on LinkedIn, as well as their other social media channels. I think that those are exceptionally helpful. I also want to make sure I know I tied in a lot of the questions as they were going, but there are some questions that we're still getting that I want to make sure that we cover before we kind of put a little bow on this career pivot workshop. And the first one being from Connor. And he says, do you find people who pivot because of burnout struggle more than someone who's reached Everest? The answer to that is yes, which is why I always want people to pause and ask themselves, am I burnt out or do I really want to pivot? And again, I'll use this example because I will not name names, but this is someone that I knew and went through this. And it was a very painful lesson. But this friend of mine was working at an industry job. And she, again, had kind of reached this point of burnout, like totally annoyed, totally overwhelmed. And her boss had said, don't quit on me. He could kind of see the signs that she was just dejected, coming into meetings, not inspired, like kind of mentally checking out, not really there. And I think he kind of had this spidey sense that she was going to quit because, again, she was just feeling totally overwhelmed. And she kind of said, I think I need this pivot. I think I need to go do something totally different. And I was kind of like, okay, you say you want to go do something different. Long story short, she quit the job. She went to do this totally different thing and she didn't like it. She didn't like it. And again, long story short, a lot of things happened, but 6 months later, she was back working at the same company for not her same boss. It was a very painful lesson that what she probably needed was a sabbatical, a 2-week vacation. She needed to be honest with her boss that she was feeling overwhelmed. Instead of quitting, thinking she wanted to go do this totally new thing. It's a classic case of grass is greener, right? We've all been there. Like, oh, grass is greener. I wish I had straight hair. I have curly hair. And then all of a sudden you straighten your hair and you go, oh, I guess I kind of did like the curly hair. So that's why I started off the workshop by saying, like, let's back up a second. Before we start talking about all this pivoting, do you actually want to pivot or are you burnt out? Because that's the question that I don't think enough people ask, which is why, Connor, I really wanted to start with that because, like, I've seen it and it's like a messy result. I mean, she's fine now, but like 6 months of like leaving a job, changing healthcare. I mean, just the whole mess when what she really needed was like a vacation or just to like step away mentally for a little bit. So again, I think that's really important. So Nicholas is asking, what about a new role? The job descriptions say that they require X years of experience at a similar role of industry. I'm so glad you brought this up, Nicholas, because I think what actually people are saying is it's not about the time, it's that they want you to know the information. They want you to know what they're doing because we've all seen examples of people who are really, really, really talented and they know tons of information and you're just like, wow. And then all of a sudden you look at the person and you're like, but that person is 35 years old. You know, it's not like they've been in the game for 60 years, but they are really smart and really knowledgeable. So I know a lot of people do this, like you must have project management skills for 10 years, but I don't want to say that that's fake, a little fake news, but I will say what they actually want, they want you to have the know-how. Because at the end of the day, if you have the know-how, they're not going to be like, well, we were ready to hire you, but once we realized you only had 6 years instead of 10, we can't give you the job. I mean, that's ridiculous. They want people that know how to do the work. And at the end of the day, that is more of a sort of more of a filter. Like if you don't know this information, like you're probably not going to make it. But I wouldn't let that hold you back from applying. I wouldn't let that hold you back from trying to get an interview. I think if you're confident that you can do the work, it doesn't matter what the job description says, must have 10 years, 5 years, 15 years. Baloney. I think that's a bunch of baloney. Still go after it because they're not going to turn you away if you're really great just because you don't have that exact amount of years. Terrible. Angela is asking about internal mobility. I have a lot of thoughts on this because you don't want to get me on my soapbox because I had this problem when I worked in corporate. I worked at Condé Nast. I worked for Brides Magazine back when we used to have magazines, RIP. It's now brides.com. But back when there were magazines, we had magazines. And long story short, I worked in the marketing team. And the person above me had been there for like 5 years. And that person wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. They were there for the foreseeable future. So your girl Kim, if she wanted a raise, if she wanted to do something else, basically was told by my boss, I don't know what you want me to do. I mean, she didn't say it like that because that would be like an HR violation, but like, well, it was basically, I don't know what you want me to do because I can't promote you because like there's somebody there and that person's not going anywhere. So like you have to leave. Essentially told me if you want to move up, you have to leave, which I think happens way more than people think it does, that people's bosses or their boss's boss or HR is basically like, there's nowhere else to move you. Like you've gone kind of as high as you can go. And that's when you do have to think about a pivot, either pivoting if you like that company, maybe it's doing another role within the company, or maybe it's leaving that company and going, it's not a pivot, it's more of a career change and you're going into another organization that you're doing that same project management, but it's not at company A, it's at company B. But I think that internal mobility career path is absolutely a real thing. I think nobody wants to talk about it because it's not a very fun subject, but I absolutely, Angela, think that people suffer from it. I certainly suffered from it. And it's sort of one of those things like it is what it is. And there's not really a good answer for it. You just have to kind of have that conversation sooner rather than later with your boss, or again, your boss's boss or HR or whoever, and kind of get the real talk, like the real, like, don't just feed me this, oh, we hope to promote you one day. Like, no, actually, like, no, like when, and really kind of drill down as much as you can and also think about what it is you want. This is the last piece that I will leave you with, because I think, again, it's really important. I was talking with my friend Cody this past weekend, and we were talking about when is it just enough? And when are you just happy? So again, I'm thinking of another friend I had, and she was a kindergarten teacher and loved her job, loved her kids, thought it was great. And people would always say to her, well, you're a kindergartner teacher now, but you could work your way up, and then maybe you teach fifth grade, and maybe you become an assistant principal, and then maybe you become a principal. And she was like, no, I'm happy. Like, I'm happy with my job. I'm happy with my salary. I'm happy with the people I'm working with. I'm happy with the people I'm working for. And so we were talking about this weekend, like, I think one of the secret superpowers that is very hard to have in today's age of, again, social media, which is basically telling you all the time you're not enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not skinny enough, you don't work enough, you don't hustle enough, you don't make enough. It's capitalism at its finest. And social media is basically drilling down this message of you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. That I actually think one of the superpowers that one can have is saying, this is enough. Like I am enough. I'm at a job I like. I'm working with people I like. I have a salary that I like. I have a boss that I like. And just saying that's enough. I don't need to necessarily, oh, I got to jump to this other company because there's not enough momentum or trajectory for me to get this new job or this new opportunity or this new thing. It's like, maybe it's just enough. Maybe you're just happy, which I know is like the antithesis of consumerism and capitalism, which is again constantly drilling down that you don't have enough, you're not hustling enough, you don't have a good enough job. It's like a superpower is really saying, I have recognized when I have enough and when I am happy. If you can do that, if you can get to the point that you are honestly able to say, like, I have reached the point that, like, I don't feel pressure, whether it's society pressure or spousal pressure or familial pressure or, just pressure to like do more, be more, get more, make more, have more, and you're just like, this is it. Like, I am happy. I think that's okay. Like, I think that is okay. I think that's totally fine. Um, By the way, if you're listening to this on a podcast, I highly recommend that you go back to either LinkedIn Live or YouTube because boy, oh boy, there are some interesting conversations happening in the chat about being your own boss and about going back to corporate. And it's getting juicy in the chat. So if you're listening to this afterwards, highly, highly recommend that you get into the chat because that is where the good stuff is happening. But hopefully this has been fun. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully this has helped give you some insight, some direction, some questions to ask, some tactics to use, some tips, some resources, some people to go copy. If there are subjects or things that you want us to do mini workshops on, please write me a message on LinkedIn, write me a message on Instagram, write me a message from my website. I want to get into the stuff that you want to get into. Honestly, I love it. It feels like we're just all kind of solving this landscape together. So if there's something that you want to dig into, let's dig into it together because career pivots, I think, are really something that I was noticing that was coming up a lot in conversation, especially as we get into Q3 and Q4 and the end of the year and evaluating kind of what are we doing and how are we jumping back into things. I think it's really, really important to have these conversations. So thank you for bringing all of your insights and tips and tricks and being so active in the chat. If you're listening to this on podcast, thank you for taking time out of your run as you're cooking dinner, as you're folding laundry to be with us today. I really appreciate it. I have missed you so, so much. It is so good to be with you. And I cannot wait to see you for the next session when we are going to get into all things AI. I know we keep talking about AI, but I still don't necessarily totally understand all of it, which is why I keep digging into like, how does this work and what are we doing with it? So if you are like me and you're kind of like, I know AI, but I kind of don't really know AI, you are going to want to dig into this session with me because hopefully we'll get a little more clarity on all the AI goodness. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It was so good seeing you. And I will see you again soon. Have a wonderful rest of the week and the long holiday weekend if you're in the United States. Bye.